Hello, in this video we're going to go through the Spark Analytics notebook in which we'll call the cognitive services for translating Greek comments into English and performing sentiment analysis in order to then import it into Power BI and create the report. So before I start, let me know that I'm an employee of Office Line, a Gold Microsoft Partner and Partner of the Year in Greece in the last 3 years. So what I'm discussing here does not necessarily represent the company's perspective or Microsoft, but are my personal comments. So the GitHub repo that I've created with all the materials necessary for someone to go through the demo is this one. And in this video, we're gonna go through the Spark notebook over here. In a previous video, we saw how to set up the two cognitive services in Azure and the linked services necessary for calling those cognitive services from Synapse Studio. And also, briefly, we went through on how to upload the necessary input file, which is this one, onto Azure Data Lake. So what we did was we created in the data section of Synapse Studio a folder here, a test folder, and in this folder I uploaded the file from my desktop. The other thing that we need to have in place in order to be able to run this notebook is a Spark pool. So we have to go to Manage, Apache Spark Pools, and create a new Spark pool. Now I have already imported the notebook here, copied and pasted the necessary instructions. The first cell of the notebook involves imports and definitions. As a note, we also need to type in the name of our linked service for the cognitive service in these two variables. In the second cell, we read the input file into a data frame. We need to have the correct path to the file here, and in order to discover the path relevant to our file, we can go to Data, in our file, right-click, New Notebook, Load to Data Frame, and it generates automatically the command necessary to import the data frame, and that's the path that will be different for you, and you should use your own path. So I'm reading the input file into the DF data frame. And as you'll see, there are 4 columns in the file. Only 2 of them are relevant. One of them has the customer's feedback, their comments, and the other one has the timestamp, the comment, and the timestamp of when the comment was submitted. So as you can see here, most of the comments are in Greek. After importing the file, we have to do some kind of restructuring, because the cognitive service requires a specific structure for being able to call it. So here we get the text, so the comment column, rename it into text, and restructure it into a one line, one column frame that has a list of strings. And here we do the same thing for the timestamp column, if you see, and then join them in order to have a data frame with two columns, one line. Each column has a list of strings that are aligned with each other. And then here we call the translator service to detect the language. So most of the comments, as you see here, are in Greek. There are two in English. So this will detect the language, and now we have to do some reformatting to bring the output in a format that's readable, and we're gonna go through the details step by step later. But let's first see the final output of this cell. So as you can see, we have the original comment, the language that was detected, and the timestamp already here. And most of them have L, which stands for Greek, and two of them have N, English. Let me go through each command step by step here. So I'm gonna copy into a new cell and display here. So we are able to see what's going on. And those show the first. So here it gets the input data frame and gets the result of the language detection service in a new column and renames it into, gets only the language from that result, and stores it into a different column called language. So this is the output of the call to the cognitive service that we saw here in the previous cell. In the next step, we select only 3 columns. So we have extracted the information we want from the service result into language, and now we only keep text, language, and timestamp. We use this arrays zip command to create like this temp column that has a structure of everything concatenated into the corresponding lines and explode it to get something like this. And at the end, we select only 3 columns and get the final data frame. Like this on the final data frame that we saw earlier, we have only the original comment, the detected language, and the timestamp. The next step involves separating that data frame into 2 pieces. one will have the Greek comments, and the other one will have the two comments that were in English. And as you can see here, we do not only filter the original data frame, this one, with the language being English, but we also create a new column called translation and copy the text into this translation column. So I'm going to do a display here as well, so it's more clear. df English to English is the original text and timestamp, and also has the translation. We don't use the language column. We have not selected it, as you can see here, because it's not relevant to our work on performing the translation, given that we'll only translate the Greek comments. The reason why we created this translation column for the English comments is to copy the text as it is and not call the translation service. So in the next step, we call the translator service in order to translate Greek to English, so from language Greek to language English. The output, the translated text, will be saved in a column called translation. And we do some further transformation to bring this result into the format that we'll see. So it's the same format as the format of the English data frame, where we created the translation column and copied the text as it is. Now it's the translation of the original Greek comment. It is saved into the translation column. So the only thing that we need to do next is to union the two data frames. So we create a data frame that has both the Greek comments and their translation, and the English comments and their translation, which is the exact same thing as the original comment. Here we define the language that we're going to use when calling the sentiment analysis service. What we're going to do is perform the sentiment analysis on the English text, on the English translation. And the reason is because Greek is not supported yet in sentiment analysis. And that's why we perform the translation as well. So we define the language to be English, US dialect, and we define the parameters that the column that has the text that we want to run sentiment analysis on is translation. The output of the service should be saved in a column called sentiment. If we have an error, we set it here. And this lang column is this one, where I defined the language to be English. Let's keep this in another cell. And here what we're gonna do is transform the original TF translated, this is, if you don't remember, display TF translated like this, and it also has the lang column that I added earlier. And what we're going to do here is so what we've done is we got the output of the sentiment analysis and concatenated it into this data frame. The output, as you can see, is like a JSON file, sentiment negative, confidence scores for some things, and there is a lot of info, so probabilities for this text to be positive or negative or neutral. We only need the sentiment, so negative, positive, neutral in the output, and that's what we do next. So in this command, we ensure that only the original columns, timestamp, text, and translation, as well as the sentiment output is selected. Parentheses. And we also alias the column to sentiment so it looks better instead of sentiment 0 sentiment. And at the end, we write a Parquet file here. I don't remember if I've removed the file from previous runs, because if I haven't, it will return an error. No, it's okay. So the file should be here. Don't do that before you publish your work, because you will lose it. So you can see there's this Parquet file, and that's what we are going to use as input into Power BI, and then create the dataset, the extra columns in the dataset, by calling the key phrase extraction service from within Power BI, and then creating the report.